The most profound knowledge in the world states that the universe itself is an illusion. But what does that mean for us mere mortals? Are we too an illusion, living in an illusionary world? Well, these matters are discussed at length within the Ashtavakra Gita, and there are many verses on the illusion of the world and the illusion of the self. Now, I want to read you an important verse today on revealing this truth and why we should enter the path of dissolution as a result. The universe, because it is unreal, being manifested like the snake in the rope, does not exist in you who are pure, even though it is present to the senses. Therefore, in this way, enter into the state of dissolution. So Ashtavakara is using the snake and rope analogy as he does many times throughout the text. And in this sense, he's using it that the universe itself is superimposed onto the true nature of reality. So it's essentially unreal, and the manifest world is kind of covering over the true nature of reality. And so this superimposition here on the real is the universe's kind of superimposed on the undifferentiated consciousness of Atman, which is identical with the ultimate reality of Brahman. And so you see this superimposition, right? And so this is essentially unreal, even though we think it is real through the senses, because we're having this sensory experience, but we don't notice what is behind, so to speak, the sensory experience, right? What is kind of the ultimate substratum that is the ground of existence. And instead we're kind of identifying just with the waves of the ocean rather than realizing we are the ocean itself. And so to revert back to Ashtavakara's analogy of the snake and the rope, we believe that the universe is real when it is essentially unreal, right? All we are doing is we're seeing the snake in the rope, because essentially the universe is Brahman, but when we perceive the world through our dualistic mind and we think that the reality itself is dual, then we are perceiving the snake in the rope. And this is what hides the Atman from us. Even though we're always ever present as that, but we live in this illusion that we're the wave. And we are this independent wave that is separate from the ocean, which is a real illogical way to think. But unfortunately, that's the hypnosis that majority of humanity are actually under the spell of. And so the role of a spiritual aspirant is to uncover this hypnosis within themselves, to break free of the spell so that you can see reality as it truly is. You don't see the snake anymore. You are the rope, and that all that exists is the rope. All that ever existed was the ocean, but you thought there were waves, but the waves are just this temporary flux in the great ocean of existence. And our jiva, our ego persona system, is basically a wave, a temporary flux that we think is who we are now and forever. And that is where the great spell abides, right? When you think you are isolated and separate from the world, that is where you will sink into the depths of the illusion of reality, Maya in Sanskrit, right? So how could you ever know that Brahman alone exists when you dwell in this dualistic mind and you think reality is dual? And so I wouldn't go and tell anyone about this good news, because those who are under the spell think it is complete gibberish because they haven't come to a state of equanimity to see into the nature of reality, right? They don't have that insight to see the nature of reality. And the great news for all spiritual aspirants is if you're on that path, you can see into the nature of reality. Ashtavakara actually mentions in this, those who are pure are beyond that type of illusion, because the universe itself, this dualistic universe, does not exist in one who is pure, because all that exists is the Atman, which is Brahman. But we are confused, and we get confused by the objects of perception based on our dualistic training, and so then we begin to interpret reality like this and that. And that's the heart of Maya, right? The illusion of measurement. So we're measuring the objects of perception, not only in the external world, but also in the internal world. We're measuring the ideologies we have, the conditioning we have, all of these ideas that we think we are measuring reality through them, according to them, and then you have this entanglement of the internal and the external, and often the internal and the external don't match up, particularly if you are so self-absorbed that you live through this conditioning. There is going to be friction eventually. And so Ashtavakra advises us in the last line where he says, therefore, in this way, enter into the state of dissolution. And so this advice is really for the spiritual aspirant who is starting to understand the true nature of reality and understands that the universe itself from the dualistic mind is an illusion, right? It's ultimately illusion. Brahman alone exists. And that's all that exists from the non-dual Advaita Vedanta perspective. And so when you understand that, then you enter into the state of dissolution because the universe is unreal and illusory. You actually know this. And this is why you become a knower of Brahman. You start to know Brahman. It's the knowledge of Brahman, right? That Brahman alone is real. And so then when you look out into the world and you think that there's this and that, good and bad, right and wrong, this is the universe of duality. This is Maya. And so nothing could ever impede the Atman, right? Nothing could ever impede the undifferentiated consciousness. It's only through life that we get hypnotized by the reality around us, and we're not around people who themselves are cognizant that Brahman alone is real. And so then we all fall for the spell, and some of us never break free throughout our whole life, which is really a great tragedy to not hear the great news that truly and fundamentally you are that, and all that exists is Brahman, and we are all that in its nature, not as two, but rather as one. Shanti, shanti, shanti.